The Drakons and their hybrids have been involved in most of the galactic wars worth their names. The Drakons were a ruthless warrior race and had one group imperative in mind over all the rest, summarized in 3 words: explore, conquer, and expand. The most intense wars raged in the Orion sector, in and around the Ring Nebula. To make a long and complicated story short, factions of the Vegans and Lyrans, when they encountered the Drakons and their hybrid warriors, came together in an alliance to defeat this very strong enemy. Both empires, the Lyran/Vegan and the Drakons, the latter whom had joined forces with other reptilian groups, had common interests in certain worlds that they wanted to conquer, and this started a full drawn-out war. The battles originated in the Orion Ring Nebula, but almost simultaneously, from another flank, the Drakos did a full-force attack upon the home planets of the Lyrans, destroyed many of them, and killed millions of Lyrans in the process. Fortunately for them, most of the Lyrans had already migrated to other worlds. The migrated Lyrans were devastated at first, but then broke out in rage and wanted revenge. After the destruction of the Lyran planets, the war was concentrated to Orion. At that time, the Orion star systems were mainly inhabited by Lyrans, Vegans, and reptilians. The Greys came into the picture later. When the Lyrans heard about the destruction of their home planets, they retaliated by furiously attacking Drakon reptilian colonies in Orion and created much devastation there. However, the Drakonian reptilians were fast to respond. Also, around that time, some humanoids, mainly Vegans, had started cooperating with the Drakon Alliance, simply because they had common interests in what they wanted to colonize and which part of space they wanted to explore. The Drakon group had as a purpose to colonize and conquer the whole Sector 9 of the Milky Way galaxy, which is the sector which Earth belongs to, and they were well on their way. The alliance between the reptilians and the humanoids is still known as the Orion Empire, and is much more recent than the Drakonian Empire, after the time when Vegans had started engaging themselves in space travel. It is my understanding that the Drakos and other reptilian races from Orion are still the majority of the reptilians in that part of Sector 9, but there are no longer any open wars, although tension exists between the races. They even trade these days, but small battles still occur. Long before the Lyrans got involved in the war against the Drakos, the latter had conquered a lot of worlds where the original inhabitants had to obey to the Drakonian Emperor. There was a lot of discontent amongst these populations, and many of them now saw their chance and hooked up with the Lyrans against their oppressors. This new alliance resulted in a federation of planets, and they all stood united against the Drakonian Empire. This federation still exists and is one of the main players in Sector 9. The members are civilizations from the Lyra constellation, the Andromeda constellation, the Pleiades, the Hyades open clusters, Yuma or Wolf 424, Procyon, Tau Ceti, Alpha Centauri, and Epsilon Eridani. All being of Lyran/Pleiadian heritage. More about the Pleiadian heritage soon. In addition, there were a number of non-physical massless hyperversal races joining, but also some Syrian groups and some Orion groups as well. Others were of various civilizations from parallel universes such as the Caldasians and the Dal. Eventually, they even got some company from renegade reptilians who wanted to free themselves from the tyranny of the Drakos. As time went by, the nature of the wars changed. They started out with a purpose to expand territory and explore new worlds, but after many years it became more about ideologies. There were quite a few humanoid forces that had joined the Federation of Planets because they were tired of being victimized by the Drakos. Gradually, they started living under the law of one, understanding that it is important to support both oneself and others around you to be able to expand, not only physically by conquering other worlds, but also to expand spiritually. Up until then, all sides, with a few exceptions, had the philosophy that service to self, STS for short, was okay because they were aware of that we are all one, and if they were STS, they helped others by helping themselves. That would work as long as STS included others, but the wars showed that the philosophy had been warped on the way. STS now meant service to self at the expense of others, and that was something entirely different. This was the cause to victimization and victimhood. With karma also being included in the mix, things got pretty serious. Those who felt they were victims started looking at those who had conquered them as evil and themselves as good. Thus, polarization now became a very unbalanced factor in these wars. This, of course, for somebody who doesn't believe war is the answer to anything, is self-explanatory, as war is always STS to the extreme. However, in the philosophy of many ancient races, this was looked upon differently. These warrior species still had to learn how karma works in a free will universe, which at the time was quite young. Now, in summary, on one side we had the Federation of Planets, whose members more and more started thinking in terms of service to others, STO for short, understanding that supporting and helping both self and others is important, as both are parts of the same whole. On the other side we had the Drakonian Empire, which now merged with the Orion Empire because they felt they had common interests, which led to joined forces. This empire, which exists up to this day as the Orion/Drakonian Empire side by side with the Federation of Planets, stayed overly STS with the serve self at the expense of others' attitude. And so the wars dragged on and on for eons.